For this video, we have asked two deaf women, Carmen and Tombi, to talk about their experiences of being deaf, going to school, and staying at the hostel. We asked them each a series of questions which they answered. We will first hear from Carmen about her experiences, and then from Tombi. Please tell us your sign name and how you became deaf.
Hi everyone, my name is Carmen. That is my sign name. I was born deaf. However, my parents only became aware of my deafness at the age of 6. The doctors that I went to see advised me that I need to go to Cape Town and I need to go for oral and for speech therapy. I went for speech therapy. However, the hearing test and the audiology test was difficult. My mother went with me. I had to go through a lot of practice. Before going into the deaf school, I had the test done. Once the tests were done, I went into the deaf school and I entered the deaf school in 1984. I was not alone. Luckily, I had my older sisters already present at the school. It was a bit nerve-wracking for me, learning how to communicate. There were so many children using sign language, so I was always with my sisters. I became much more aware of how to communicate and communicating with children every day. In my class, the teachers could not sign and they couldn't teach using sign language. They would speak and sign, which was a bit difficult for me. Sometimes I understood, sometimes I didn't, and I couldn't take notes very clearly. And the opportunity for me to ask questions was also very limited, and it was difficult for me, especially when the teacher was writing on the board and had their back to us. So I missed a lot of important information. So my daily routine at school was like that.
Who was your favorite teacher and why?
What I loved about the teachers, I had one favorite teacher. Her name is Mrs. Turner. That was her sign name because she loved to cook. She always encouraged me. At that time, especially when I was in grade 6 to grade 8, I missed a lot of things and I wanted to further my education, and she fought for me to get additional subjects as well. I was doing a lot of cooking subjects and she advocated and she supported me at the school, and I communicated very well with her. She could sign fluently, and that's why I also loved her. She was always encouraging and supportive. She wouldn't allow me to give up, and she was always there. She became my mother at school, my second mother, because my mother was very far away. So whenever I had issues, she would assist me to resolve my issues, and that's why she was my favorite teacher.
What did you really enjoy at school and the hostel?
When I was at school, one thing I enjoyed the most was socializing and using sign language and becoming more skilled in using sign language. That helped me improve. So I enjoyed socializing and recreation time. In the hostel, we were taught many responsibilities, chores, make your bed, dressing yourself, cleaning, learning how to be responsible. One of the problems that I had was I was the naughty one out of the bunch, and I was the leader of a group of kids. During the night, we would sneak out to the kitchen and steal bread and food. And the hostel mother, she knew very well that I was the lead culprit of the group, and I was encouraging the others to do what I was doing. So I learned a lot from that. I received a lot of punishments, but it taught me to be a good leader, and it helped me to become more responsible, knowing what was right from wrong, and also teaching my peers that. I do miss the times at the hostel, and unfortunately, that time has passed.
What did you not enjoy at school and the hostel?
One thing that was a disappointment for me was that, yes, at school it was very good. I enjoyed it, but I worked very hard and I studied very hard with the expectations that I passed every year. When I used to come back in the new year, I would have the expectation that I'm moving on to, for example, grade 5. They would tell me, no, but you're repeating your previous grade. And when I asked why, they said because I didn't complete a certain number of things, which I didn't understand because to me, my work was good. And that was a frustration for me. And every 2 years, I would do the same grade. I would repeat grades twice, and it made me disappointed and demotivated. When I reached grade 8, I thought that I would do more, but the principal told me, unfortunately, I'm only limited to grade 8 because of my age. I was already 18 at the time, and that I had to leave the school. That was one of my biggest disappointments, being at school. With a hostel as well. We slept there, it was fine, we didn't have any serious issues. My only concern was that my family was very far away, and I would only see them when the school closed. Then I would go home, but it was a short time, normally 2 to 3 weeks. Then I'd come back to school and I'd be here for 6 months at a time. So for things that happened, like my brother's wedding, I would get excited wanting to attend, but the principal would tell me I can't go because it's during school times. And that made me feel like I was missing out and that I was stuck in the hostel. That was also a disappointment, being in the hostel, because I was always denied many requests with my family. Our only communication was through letters, and I would only get letters after a while, after about 3 months at a time. And it was frustrating for me because I didn't know what was happening back at home. And I missed my family a lot in that time while I was at the hostel.
How did you communicate at your school and at home?
Within the school, everyone was fluent in sign language and we could communicate well. But the problem that I faced was when I got home, I wanted to teach my family the alphabet and sign language. And my mother would tell my brothers and sisters not to sign, that they need to teach me how to speak orally. Because the principal instructed my mother that the only way I can improve is if I improve my speech. And I didn't feel that was important. So when I was home, I had to always keep quiet or not sign. When I finished school and I came home, my mom wouldn't know how to communicate. She would call one of my sisters to interpret for me. And so there wasn't a clear communication between myself and my mother. My father was more open and clear in communicating with me. He would try to be patient and speak very slow. But the dependency on an interpreter was a bit frustrating for me. At a later stage, they then realized they want to learn sign language, which was fine with me, and I tried to teach them the basics.
How do you feel your school experience shaped your identity as a deaf adult?
Identifying myself as a deaf person, that didn't happen while I was in my childhood stage because I didn't know what it meant to be deaf. Also, I had a lack of confidence. I was very shy. I was always a little naive, and not because I didn't know what was happening in terms of being deaf and what it means to be deaf with a capital D. When I was about 16 years old, I then encountered the deaf community and I started socializing and learning many things, learning that there were role models in the community, what being deaf meant, and the encouragement that I can fight for my future, I can become someone. So from all those experiences, I now know who I am as a deaf person, and I am proud of my identity.
Please tell us your sign name and how you became deaf.
Hi everyone, my name is Ntombi. My surname is Majibana. I became deaf at the age of 9. How that happened was my aunt used to abuse me a lot. My mom placed me in her care, and I stayed with my aunt from the age of 7. And she would look after me, and during that time I was staying with her, she abused me. My mom then brought me back home, and when she would call me, Ntombi, I wouldn't respond. And then she'd come to me and she'd ask me, why aren't you hearing me? I'm calling you. And I would tell her, but I cannot hear you. That confused her a lot. How I entered the deaf school was my mom heard from a neighbor that there's a deaf school in Umtata. So my mom took me to the school along with a neighbor who showed her where the school was. And we learned about the deaf school in the area. And I went into the school in the year 1980. They called me in and I went in for testing. I was also given a sign name at the school based on my identity, and because of the scar on my cheek, that's my sign name.
Who was your favorite teacher and why?
My favorite teacher at the school was Mr. Keswa. The reason for that is he taught us very well. He taught us many things. He was my accounting teacher. He was very patient in the way that he taught us. He would repeat himself. Even if we didn't understand something, he was patient and he would repeat everything we didn't understand. He could sign very well. He wasn't a very experienced signer, but he could sign well enough with us. And he communicated clearly. He was always encouraging us to improve our education.
What did you really enjoy at school and the hostel?
At the school, I enjoyed many different things, for example, sports and my subjects. With sports specifically, I enjoyed netball, and I also played netball in the hostel, and we communicated as a team, and I really enjoyed that. When we went into competitions, we usually competed with hearing schools, and the way that we did it was in a specific way. When we met with the hearing schools, we would be very shocked because many of them were tall and they would laugh at us because we were tiny deaf children and they thought they could win us. But we planned how we would play, we strategized how we would keep low during the game. And the hearing children would struggle to compete against us, and we were always winning all the games against the hearing schools.
What did you not enjoy at school and the hostel?
One thing I didn't like in school, specifically with teachers signing, they weren't very skilled in signing, and also because our English skills weren't that well, communication was difficult. At the hostel, I would stay there for 6 months at a time. We were also not very happy with that because we were there for 6 months, then we would go home for a short period of time, which made us feel that we couldn't communicate properly with our family. Also at the hostel, our hostel mothers would get the best of food and we would get the dry bread and the food we didn't like. So many of us weren't happy about that. Another thing was they always forced us to clean the rooms, the kitchens, and we didn't understand why, because we didn't have enough time to study and do the chores as well.
How did you communicate at your school and at home?
At school, the communication in sign language was very well. We communicated with all the deaf children, but at home it was completely different. Because my family was hearing, I tried to teach them sign language, but they would take it as a joke and they wouldn't take me seriously. So I left it. So they didn't understand what sign language actually was. Also, the way they communicated with me was orally and very slow. They would speak very slow and I'll just try to pretend as if I understood what they were saying.
How do you feel your school experience shaped your identity as a deaf adult?
When I was at school, I was a very shy, fearful teenager. especially when I entered school as a child. I didn't understand sign language. After entering the deaf school, I then learned about the deaf community and about sign language. And how I accepted myself or my identity was that it took a while because I didn't know what sign language was. I didn't know what being deaf meant. And so my knowledge in that field was very little. I then went into a deaf school in Durban, Fulton School for the Deaf. And there they taught us about deaf culture. And I learned a lot of interesting things. And I felt very confused because the school I was in, that I was in Umtata, Ifata School for the Deaf, didn't teach us all these things. When I really identified myself within the deaf culture was when I moved to Cape Town. My confidence then improved because I had no confidence prior to that. I was taught how to be confident, knowing my deaf culture, knowing that I shouldn't be naive about my rights, about sign language and the rights of sign language, things that I didn't know. And so that is how I built my identity, and I'm proud to be deaf. And now I work at the deaf community of Cape Town.